Let's start here. Obviously, 2025, I can't think of a more insane start to a year. I could be wrong. I'm young, relatively, 31. Some of y'all might say I'm unk. It's whatever. I got nieces and nephews, so if you want to call me unk, I'm not offended. But I still think I'm pretty young, right? But 2025, obviously, we saw what happened in New Orleans, which I have so many questions about that. You know, I saw a video that said, and I'll show you the video in a second, but it said they had barriers to prevent what happened from happening, but they didn't use the barriers. They said that they were updating the barriers for the Super Bowl because the Super Bowl is going to be in New Orleans, and they didn't have the barriers in place because they were going to update the barriers, which is crazy because they also had secondary barriers. So they have 700-pound barriers that are specifically designed to stop a car from doing exactly what happened. But those barriers, for whatever reason, were pushed off to the side. So they weren't in use on what you would think would be one of the busiest nights of the entire year on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, New Year's Eve. And for whatever reason, they didn't want to put the barriers up. Very interesting. On top of that, on the same day, we had the CyberTruck explosion. Now, I'm not sure how many of you got into this podcast last night, but Sean Ryan dropped an insane podcast last night. I watched the entire thing. You've probably already seen it. Some of you have, some of you haven't. This completely changed my perspective on the entire CyberTruck explosion. And you know, a lot of people are going to say, or a lot of people are speculating that the CyberTruck explosion and what happened in New Orleans are correlated. I never really thought they were correlated. The only correlation was the fact that they were both in the army or they were both in the military. And at one point in time, they served at the same, base in the military. But besides that, excuse me, there was really no correlation. But this story makes it even more clear that there's most likely not any correlation to what happened, aside from the fact that there's some shady stuff going on. Now, this is an email from the CyberTruck bomber, Matthew Liversburgers. And he sent this email December 31st, 2024, essentially saying that he had information on the drones that we were seeing. So all those drones that were happening on the East Coast and on the West Coast, Matthew is claiming that these are some sort of gravitic propulsion systems, which is essentially like an anti-gravity science fiction technology that he's claiming the US has access to, but more pressing that China has an abundance of access to. And he's essentially saying that China can put a drone anywhere they want on the East Coast and attack at any point in time. So that was one of the things that he had mentioned in this email. And then he had also mentioned, and there's speculation that the main reason why, Matthew did what he did was because of war crimes that took place in 2019 that he was involved in to some capacity. I'm not 100% sure what his involvement was, but he has information, he has intel on these war crimes that took place involving the United States and Afghanistan and other, areas in the Middle East. And he wanted to blow the whistle on those war crimes. And he was looking for different outlets, media outlets, in order to do so. He had also mentioned that he was being followed by, different government agencies, the FBI, and different agencies were tracking his phone, and a whole bunch of wild and crazy stuff. Now, if you watch the Sean Ryan podcast, they also had mentioned the possibility that this dude from the CyberTruck explosion could possibly still be alive, which is wild. And the reason why they mentioned this is because they did a DNA test, and the DNA that came back from the CyberTruck explosion was different than the DNA of his son. Now, the media, the mainstream media, they took this information and they said that the reason why Matt Livelsberger's, the reason why he drove the Tesla Cybertruck and exploded it in front of, the Trump Hotel in Vegas was because of some relationship issues. He was having a hard time with his wife or his ex-wife. He found out that his son was not his son, and therefore he was so distraught that he did what he did. This is what the mainstream media is pushing. That's one of their primary narratives. But when you go back to the podcast from Sean Ryan, they're kind of insinuating that he could still be alive based on the fact that the DNA did not match, which is very, very interesting. Now, I don't know what to believe. I'm more inclined to believe what took place on the Sean Ryan podcast than the mainstream media, because the mainstream media, I mean, at this point, I don't even really know why we have news stations if they're not going to report on the truth. They're going to report on what they're told to report on. They're not going to report on the actual facts. But it is very interesting that this dude, who was a Green Beret, very well qualified, probably could have took down that entire building, the Trump building. He could have took down that entire building. It's very interesting that he chose a Cybertruck, which is a self-driving vehicle. So he wouldn't have had to operate it himself. Let's just say it like that. The vehicle can drive itself, right? And it's very interesting that he chose the bombs, quote unquote, which is like a majority of just fireworks. If you watch the explosion, I'm not going to show it because I'm pretty sure everybody has seen it at this point. If you watch the explosion, it literally just looks like a bunch of fireworks going off. It's literally just a bunch of fireworks. So I don't think he had any intention of hurting anybody, because if he did, I think he was very well qualified and capable to hurt a lot of people. I think it was more so just a statement that he made in order to bring light to this information that he has. I don't know. We'll see what comes of it. We'll see what happens. But as I said, I don't really think that there's any correlation to what took place in New Orleans. The New Orleans story is a whole different animal, in my opinion. One of the top comments on this video, this dude Brandon said something is off. Something is definitely off, for sure, with the New Orleans stuff. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but they were saying that they found different type of bombs that were planted around New Orleans. And some people are alleging that the primary plan was to detonate those bombs in New Orleans. But something went wrong. One thing led to another. The bombs didn't go off. So instead of doing nothing, he took the Ford Lightning and drove it through the crowd in order to do something, because plan A didn't work. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what's being said in the media. It is crazy, though, that... Oh, and they also said that the dude in Vegas with the Cybertruck and the dude in New Orleans, they're trying to say that they're correlated because they both rented the vehicles from the same company, which is Toro. So Toro is literally just an app. It's an app that has a whole bunch of third party, just people, normal people who rent their vehicles. Most of the time, they're renting their personal vehicles. So I don't really know how that has any correlation to anything. But from the standpoint of the truck that was used, it's crazy that he used the Ford Lightning, because if you know anything about electric vehicles, the 0 to 60 is outrageous. Sometimes like 2.5, 3.5 seconds. So the people who were able to get away from that truck that was flying down the street, they literally had some angels on their side, because you don't have a lot of time to react in those situations when you have a truck that is going 80 to 90, 100 miles an hour with a 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. It's crazy. I want to play this real quick. This is the FBI talking a little bit about the dude who drove the truck in New Orleans.
Several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament. And he
Hold on. That was an interesting part. This was a primary reason why I wanted to play this video.
Harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated...
Yeah, he does look like Jason Kidd. He said that he was concerned that, according to the FBI, his name's Jabbar, right? Or his last name's Jabbar. According to the FBI, he was concerned that the media would not focus on the war between the believers and the unbelievers. Also saw this, which I don't understand. This whole video right here, this is the New York Post. They're going through the home of Shamsud Din Jabbar. Everything just looks like a setup, bro. It looks a little too convenient. I'm not trying to discredit the people who lost their life, because actual families are hurting. I understand that. And actual people lost their life. I don't know what's going on outside. Somebody banging on my door. But this whole setup looks a little too convenient. Let me play this video.
We're here inside the New Orleans terrorist home. You can see that it's been clearly destroyed, the door at least, from the FBI raid yesterday. But if we walk through the home, we see some signs of what he was up to. He had this work area here, lots of different chemicals splayed around, and different electronics. This is, again, a work setup. Left receipts, just very unkempt in here. If we go over here, actually, you can see...
She said it's very unkempt in here. The FBI just got done running through the place. What do you expect?
The Department of Justice documents here, the search warrant, and the property that they recorded here, which seems to be a lot of chemicals. Again, just left in disarray. There's a bedroom back here, and what appears to be his collection of religious materials, his Qurans, an open Quran with a passage there, as well as even the Bible here, but mostly books on Islam, and his prayer rug just to the left of me here.
So the media, here's the thing. I guess his brother came out and his brother said that we shouldn't be looking at this from the view of religion, essentially trying to say that his religious views as a Muslim did not prompt him to do what he did. This dude, just from the interviews that I was watching and stuff like that, looked like a pretty normal guy. Looked like a pretty normal guy. From Texas, was in the military. He was divorced quite a bit of times. I think he had 3 ex-wives, which is a lot. I guess there's stories going around that said that he was going broke. I just, it's hard for me to believe the overall narrative that's being pushed in the media. Once again, I don't think there's any correlation, in my opinion, between the Tesla Cybertruck and what happened in New Orleans. I think the day, like New Year's Day, I think that's just a very appealing landmark to do stuff, but I don't think there's any correlation. It's just very, very interesting how the mainstream media is trying to serve us this narrative on a platter. It's very interesting. Now, I'm trying to figure out how many more days we got of this dude right here. What's the date? January 4th. When's the inauguration? This is what Biden had to say about it.
Here's what we know so far. The FBI has reported to me the killer was an American citizen, born in Texas. He served in the United States Army on active duty for many years. He also served in the Army Reserve until a few years ago. The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill. The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby. The situation is very fluid, and the investigation has a preliminary stage. And the fact is that right now, excuse me, there you go. The law enforcement and intelligence community are continuing to look for any connections, associations, or co-conspirators.
This was very interesting.
New Orleans had top-of-the-line barriers to prevent car attacks, but didn't use them on New Year's.
We have them. I didn't know about them, but we have them.
They're called
Can you believe she said that? Can you believe she said that? Ann Kirkpatrick. We have them. I didn't know about them, but we have them. You're the police superintendent. You are the police superintendent. What are you talking about? This is probably, I don't know, a busier time. Well, I'm sure there's busier times, but there's not very many busier times in New Orleans than New Year's Eve. People travel from other states. Some people travel from other countries to go to New Orleans, to visit Bourbon Street. Now, it was a lot different before Katrina hit. Before Katrina hit, it was a lot different. But there's still people that go out there and they view that as being a very, attractive tourist spot. How do you not know that you had these barriers to protect people against exactly what just happened? That was a crazy statement.
New Orleans had top-of-the-line barriers to prevent car attacks, but didn't use them on New Year's.
We have them. I didn't know about them, but we have them.
They're called Archer barriers, 700 pounds of L-shaped steel, certified by the Department of Homeland Security to stop cars from careening into pedestrian areas. They were credited with saving lives just last year when a woman was stopped from driving into a California parade. The CEO of the company that makes them said New Orleans purchased the barriers back in 2017. These barriers that the city deployed a day after the tragedy look like the same ones from 8 years ago, according to the CEO. Separately, security bollards like these were installed in Bourbon Street years ago, but they were in the process of being replaced for the Super Bowl since police found them inefficient, according to the New Orleans mayor. The city council president told WWL-TV that she and other council members believe that the repairs should have been completed earlier, but she also thinks that wouldn't have prevented the mass killing, that the driver would have tried some other way to get around the barriers. New Orleans had
I think that's a fireable statement, in my opinion. In my opinion. In my opinion. I think that's a fireable statement. Y'all let me know what you think.